The world is witnessing a horrifying hypocrisy, a dangerous double standard ever since the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack on Israel, an attack that fomented anti-Semitic protests all over the world, an attack that normalized social media and mainstream media demonizing Israel and the Jews, that triggered the true colors of some academia, educators, universities, teachers' unions, that justified liberals, progressives, the UN, various politicians constantly scolding Israel. Over the centuries, there's been the constant murder of Jews for all different scapegoat reasons from all different nations, inquisitions, pogroms, Holocaust, and then more murder in 1948 when the Arab world refused to accept the 1948 United Nations Partition Land Plan to establish an independent Palestine and an independent Jewish state for what was to be an eventual two-state solution, mandating half of Israel to the Jews and the other half to the Palestinians. Basically, Palestine could have official statehood and Jews could finally have something they never had, their own state with safety and security after 6 million were murdered a few years earlier during the Holocaust. The world eventually accepted the UN plan. The Jews gladly accepted the plan. The Palestinians, they rejected the plan. No sooner did Israel begin to create their state, the Arab world tried to annihilate them. No Jews allowed. And since 1948, there's been one singular goal of Palestinian leadership: to rid the Middle East of Jews. Well, Israel said never again in the aftermath of the Holocaust. They fought back. In 1948, the Israeli Declaration of Statehood sparked the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. That war which the Arab world brought upon the Jews to destroy them, forced the Jews to take control of Israel for their survival. What was Israel supposed to do? What could Israel do when another extermination just after the Holocaust was imminent? Keep giving back land, keep rewarding terrorists as they destroy Israel, murder Jews? Today, Hamas is the terrorist group that brutally murders Israelis and even murders their own innocent Palestinian people if Hamas deems them to be traitors or Jew sympathizers. Hamas oppresses their own Palestinian people as the world blames Israel. To be fair, the sins of the father are not the sins of the son. All Palestinians are obviously not responsible for the depravity of Hamas. There are amazing people of Palestinian descent, some of whom I am honored to know as friends for many years, and there must be some sort of two-state solution, any solution where Palestinians have a thriving society, human rights, self-determination. And over the years, Israel has tried to help Palestinians achieve just that. There's just one caveat: recognize Israel's right to exist. Israel says that is the deal. Just give Israel peace so Israel can eventually help create that thriving Palestine where the two states coexist, help each other, respect each other, our neighbors. With regards to the hypocrisy, the double standard, I'm speaking to the liberal mainstream media. I'm speaking to all the radical activist news reporters. I'm speaking to Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Squad, to the Israel-hating liberal elite university presidents and professors, to the anti-Semitic bloggers on TikTok and social media, to all the Jew-hating protesters, to the United Nations leaders who conveniently fail to mention all of Israel's efforts to try and achieve peace since 1948. For example, in the early 1990s, when President Bill Clinton helped pave the way for the Oslo Accords, a peace process with Israel and the Palestinians, the PLO. In 93 and again in 95, President Clinton brought together PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin to sign a peace treaty. Very simply put, the Oslo Accords stated that Israel must recognize the PLO as a representative of the Palestinian people, as a true partner in negotiations with Israel. And for their part, the PLO must recognize the state of Israel with a promise of lasting peace. Both Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin signed the agreement, which President Clinton witnessed on behalf of the world. This allowed PLO leadership to relocate Palestinians to Gaza and part of the West Bank, which had been under Israeli control since 1967. And for the record, Israel had to take control of this land back then for safety and security reasons after the 67 Six-Day War, when once again the Arab world tried to exterminate Israel, and Israel fought back. And after that brutal 1967 attack on Israel, Israel said, you don't get land back until you make peace. So based upon the Oslo Accords, in return for land, the eventual Palestinian state, Arafat and his PLO promised to stop the terror against Israel, promised to stop the demand for the expulsion of all Jews, for the elimination of Israel. Prime Minister Rabin gave everything possible to help establish a self-governed Palestinian state and peace for Israel. However, at the 11th hour, after years of finally getting to this place, Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat and his PLO withdrew from the Oslo Accords, walked away, abandoned the peace deal. Arafat said no after being given almost everything the Palestinians had asked for. What the radical hypocrites never admit, or are afraid to admit, or are too uninformed to even know, is that Yasser Arafat and his PLO were never in good faith, especially with influence from Hamas, going to approve a deal with the Jews, a deal with Israel. Because if Arafat had done that, his legacy as a martyr, his legacy as the Israel slayer, the Palestinian protector, everything he lived for, well, it's over. As much as Arafat tried to fool the world with his befriending of Israel, Arafat sadly believed his entire life would have been for naught, would have been in vain throughout the entire Arab world had he made peace with Israel. Like Hamas today, Arafat ultimately proclaimed his martyrdom ideology not to live next door to Israel, not to be partners in the Middle East, where they strive together for a sustainable future where both nations succeed. The ultimate goal, rid the region of any and all Jews, end of story. An all or nothing sum game. Now fast forward from the 1990s to 2005 for all those hypocrites who insist Israel is occupying Gaza and imprisoning Palestinians. Well, Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005 when Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon basically instructed the Israeli government to evict all Israeli residents from there and withdraw all Israeli security forces, which they did. Gaza is now the home of the Palestinians. And if Hamas today could just recognize Israel's right to exist, stop the terror, stop the killings, stop trying to destroy the Jews, then Israel is obviously going to eventually relinquish the limited control it has over the borders today. Limited control, unfortunately necessary these days to protect Israeli citizens from Hamas, from terrorist attacks like October 7th, their 9/11. What more obvious evidence is there that without some sort of limited control for now, Israel is obliterated? Should Israel just allow another Holocaust of the Jewish people? Should every nation simply relinquish control of its borders to neighboring and surrounding enemy nations? Obviously, it's unheard of, yet there's a constant hypocrisy and double standard for Israel. The other problem is Hamas immediately began to build tunnels and terror cells, a concrete maze of terror networks, really. They were underground to safeguard themselves against their many terrorist attacks on Israel. Why didn't Hamas take some of the billions of dollars the Palestinian Authority gets each year from the EU and US combined and build, let's say, an above-ground societal infrastructure for its suffering Palestinian people who Hamas keeps prisoner in Gaza? Since Hamas took over Gaza nearly 2 decades ago, they've launched rockets into Israel instead of launching a plan of action for a new society for their suffering Palestinian people. The Hamas charter clearly states destroy Israel and the Jews, no coexistence. So what more can be said? So in the future, just try and recognize that you're often hearing hypocritical and double standard reporting from the mainstream media and the Jew-hating clan, failing to tell you the entire truth, failing to give you true context and history, failing to interview logical, pragmatic, honest voices, and recognize when you hear someone like Rashida Tlaib or AOC telling you what a genocidal monster Israel is, or when you hear the president of an Ivy League university telling you genocide of Jews has to be put in proper context, or when you hear the UN telling you how Israel is committing war crimes, when you hear TikTok, when you hear social media telling you Israel is an occupier and oppressor, when you hear Jew-hating protesters chant "Free Palestine," just know this group of radical activists is going to continue the hypocrisy, going to continue the double standard where Israel and the Jews are concerned. No question there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza today. It's devastating. Palestinians are suffering. Whose fault is that? Ask yourself honestly. Tell Hamas to free Palestine and to free Israel from their terror. And you want to talk hypocrisy? You want to talk double standard? The world is demanding a ceasefire. How about demanding all hostages are returned to Israel safely, unharmed, now? And how about more hypocrisy, more double standard? Russia brutally invaded Ukraine back in 2022, murdering thousands of innocent Ukrainian civilians and children. That's true. And Ukraine fought back, defended itself, with Ukraine now killing an estimated hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers? Where's the outrage from the mainstream media and the anti-Israel zealots demanding Ukraine immediately implement a ceasefire and stop killing Russians in Ukraine's war on terror, so to speak? So you get the analogy. It's just hypocritical. Where's the outrage when Hamas brutally assaulted, tortured, mutilated, murdered hundreds of Israeli Jewish women and girls? When they weaponized these barbaric acts against women in the world, basically went silent. Where are all the women's rights groups, the Me Too activists, the feminists, the human rights organizations? Where are they? Where are the women leaders in the US and around the world emphatically denouncing this? I guess the victims here were Israeli women, Jewish women. Where's the outrage when people all over the world say, kill the Jews, death to Israel, destroy Israel? And yet, if you dare say anything negative about any other minority, any protected class, you are silenced, censored, canceled. I guess in this case, the minority is the Jewish people. And as the now former anti-Israel Harvard University president hinted, there could be some context missing when talking about the genocide of Jews. Like I said, the hypocrisy, the double standard. Thanks for being part of David Nazar News. Let me know your opinion. Your voice is vital.